This is the Tin Can Bay boat ramp. Mozart was owned by a guy a couple of owners back that lived on the Great Sandy Strait or in Tin Can Bay for a couple of years. So it's familiar territory to her, even though it's the first time that she's been back here since the major refit, so no one would recognise her. Later on in the journey I'm going to be visiting one of the bays further down the Tin Can Bay Inlet, where a lot of older people in older boats have chosen to spend their final years at their final anchorage. Just beyond the launching ramp is the dolphin feeding. I've parked in one of the long-term parking bays rather than in the rigging area so that I can take my time. It's generally about 20 minutes, but because this is a long trip it might take anything up to an hour to get prepared. The key to standing the mast up without having any complications is to get all these shrouds and stays untangled and lying in the bottom of the cockpit so that you can stand it straight up. There's a retained pin in the mast step which has to be removed prior to rolling the mast back. The mast sits in a roller yoke which sits on top of the pintles where the rudder normally sits, and that's the position that I cart it in. And you can see here I'm just jiggling some of the shrouds and stays because there's a tendency for them to get jammed, and a few minutes spent untangling all that can make it a lot easier. If you're on your own it's a little bit more challenging, but if you've got someone else that can stand at the aft end of the boat and just untangle things as you're pushing it up, that can make it quite a lot easier. The mast raising is easy to manage on my own, and I've done it many times. Just got to be careful not to slip, and hence I've taken off my footwear, and it's not too heavy. The transition when you get to the mast, you just got to be careful you don't let go of the forestay. The whole process only took about an hour on my own. It can be reduced to about 20 minutes when you're just going for a day sail, but because I'm going for 5 days there's a fair bit more involved. This ramp's a fairly steep one as far as ramps go, but the tide's fairly full, so there's not much current flowing and there's very little wind, which all makes it a bit easier to do it single-handed. It's a good idea to pause right here for just a moment and take a really close look at what is happening with the tidal flows and with the wind and other boats and so on, and things will generally go a lot smoother if you've just taken that little time to pause and think through.
Travel far, armed with 7 nations, was harmed in many places, but still had not found a promised land. But all the walls of Jericho stand with an angry king in the middle. But instead of drawing her weapon, she played trumpets and fiddles.
The tide is full and flowing out towards Great Sandy Strait, and there's no wind to speak of. This means that I don't need to use any fenders, which saves a bit of time. It also saves the embarrassment of discovering the fenders are still in place 2 days later. I can just attach one mooring line to the bow and confidently walk away and park the car and trailer. Tin Can Bay is a small coastal town in southeast Queensland, situated 218 kilometres north of Queensland's capital, Brisbane. They think the name came from a morphing of the indigenous name Tin Can. In the 1870s, Tin Can Bay was a point where logs were rafted and then hauled to the timber mills in nearby Maryborough. Later it became an important fishing port, and it's a very popular place for recreational fishing. I find it is a good safe place to park the car for Fraser Island trips, although it does add an extra 5 nautical miles to the journey. but I never tire of sailing the broad and mostly deep Tin Can Bay Inlet. This is part one of a 5-day sailing adventure in which I showcase decades of liveaboard sailboats, with many intriguing boats steeped in maritime history, moored and anchored along the way. Casting off from the Tin Can Bay Marina has Mozart in the grip of the outgoing tide, heading northeast towards Inskip Point and the Great Sandy Strait that leads up to Fraser Island. On the way out, I nose around some of the many anchored liveaboards parked in the inlet. And this is just a small taste of what I have to show you on the return leg of the journey. Every boat has a unique story to tell. Do you know anything about these boats? If you do, please leave some comments below, as we're all intrigued. Who are the designers? Where have they travelled? And who has found safe haven on board? I want to go back and knock on some of the topsides to chat with some of the characters that call Tin Can Bay Inlet their home. Maybe you're one of those privileged people that lives a simple life in this beautiful and mostly serene anchorage. If you count yourself amongst those, message me on Facebook or send me an email if you're up for sharing a coffee or even a beer sometime. I'd love to hear some of your yarns next time I'm up your way. For now, it'll have to suffice to let the pictures tell the story, but this is so inadequate. I really want to delve deeply into the mysteries of decades of maritime history. I think these images will raise more questions than answers, so sit back and enjoy a bit of slow TV if that is your thing. And please, don't be a stranger.
It's time for these walls to come down. Oh, it's time for these walls to come down. See, they will crumble at the sound of you calling me baby, baby. So she played for 7 days and not a shot was fired. But this new music being played reached the lonely man in the tower. And at first he tried to fight it, but he could not turn away. The sudden building new desire to go reopen the gate. Oh, it's time for these walls to come down. Oh, it's time for these walls to come down. See, they will crumble at the sound of you calling me baby, baby, please. There was milk in the coffee and muffins warm with honey and music with such beauty on the day that she met me. Oh, could it be we found the promised land? Oh, could it be that I could be your man? Oh, could it be we found the promised land? Oh, could it be?
Just throwing the motor in neutral for a little while. Just draining the water out of the cockpit, comes in through the scuppers when you're under power. So I've got these plugs that can pop out if you get a wave in the cockpit, and I'm about to fit those to stop the water from coming back in. When I restored it, I didn't quite get it right with the scuppers, and one of them still leaks a little bit, so it's a job for a rainy day. And it leaks when the plugs are not in, but once I put the plugs in, that's it. It won't leak into the boat at all. So you can see here I'm staying in fairly snug on the inside. It'll be a bit too snug actually. I need to head out a bit into the channel to get it over that here at high tide. And I'm just going to head right across there and head across up the Great Sandy Strait. Hi, I'm Christopher. In my day job, I swap hats from sailing moonlight to business pilot. If you're in business and need video marketing or a website that works, you might like to consider using my services and support the channel at the same time.